Okay, I've selected 10 questions out of, I think, 7 or 800. And mostly I've selected them based upon how many thumbs up you people gave them. Because I figured that, if people really, really, really wanted to see a question answered, they'd do the thumbs up. And there were quite a few comments that had that. So that's pretty much how I've decided what to answer. There are a couple of exceptions right up front. The first exception is a question asked by Jacos138, which is, would you deep throat that microphone for me? I'm assuming means this microphone. Yes, I will, but not yet. You have to wait till the end of the video to see that. The reason I'm going to do that, aside from me just, wanting the excuse to deep throat something, is that he was not Jacos 138 was not the only person to ask if I would do that. I think there was at least 5 or 6 other people. So I guess that there is some demand for this to happen, and I always give the people what they want, especially when it coincides with what I want, which is to deep throat this microphone. I've done it on Blog TV a few times, but this will be the first time on YouTube. It'll be special. It'll be a moment of bonding between my audience and I. Blue Wolfie asks, what are your views on cannibalism? And this is a question that I chose simply because I wanted to answer it. There was no thumbs up. There was no freaky people who were like, cannibalism. I'm the freaky person going, yeah, in this instance. So there was a guy in Germany a few years back named Armin Muse. A lot of you have probably heard of this guy. There was quite a bit of debate about the morality of his actions, and what he did was he ate another man consensually. Basically it was a victim who consented to be eaten, and in fact participated right up until his participation was no longer possible, with being cannibalized. And a lot of people, say that, well, there's nothing wrong with what he did. And I happen to be one of them because my morality is based upon consent. And I think that's the only morality that makes sense to me, is to say that a human being belongs to themselves, that we are our own property, and that we have jurisdiction over our own bodies. And that means that if we want to do illicit substances, substances that are currently illicit, then we should be able to do so. If you want to do a drug, you should be able to do it. If you want to, be cannibalized, that should also be something you could do. Simply because how do you subvert someone's will about their own destiny? Or, how do you say that you're going to remove someone's ability to self-determine? I don't think that that's ethical, because it presumes that you know better than them what they need, what's good for them. And, I think we all feel like we know what's better for other people. And that's fine to feel that way. And it's fine to use tools like persuasion to change their minds or to alter their courses. But at the same time, I don't think that it's proper for us to legislate their own actions. And I also, that being said, I think there are limits to what a person can do within the confines of ethics. I don't believe in an anarchistic free-for-all where anyone can just do anything at any time. I think that my rights have to end at the point where they infringe upon your rights. And where that line is drawn is something that can be debated. Do I have the right to punch you in the face? I don't think that I do. Do I have the right to kill you without your consent? Obviously, I don't believe that that should be allowed. Do I have the right to hurt your feelings? I say that I should be able to hurt your feelings. Other people say that even that should be taboo. Although if we're gonna ban hurt feelings, I don't see how that's pragmatically possible, because so many things that a person can do can incidentally hurt the feelings of another. It seems like that would be the most restrictive guideline of all, if you're not allowed to hurt another person's feelings. And no one wants to have their feelings hurt, but I think that that's the price we have to pay to maximize freedom. So my views on cannibalism are my views on consent. More personal view on cannibalism is that I am very interested in it from a fetishistic point of view, and have been for quite a long time. When I was a young, amazing atheist, well, I'm not in character right now. Not that Amazing Atheist is a character, it's just a mode of presentation. But when I was a young lass, like, is lass female? I don't know. Whatever I was. Lad, that's what I'm looking for. Young, I could be a lass too, it doesn't matter. Gender is fluid, whatever, fuck it. When I was a young boy, young and supple, and ripe for Catholic invasion, although I wasn't Catholic, so I never got the life-changing and I imagine quite affirming experience of being molested by a Catholic priest. And I feel awful about not having that wonderful joy brought into my life. I'm being sarcastic right now, in case you didn't know. Yeah, but I was on the internet and I saw the work of an artist called Dulcet. I feel like I'm pronouncing that wrong, probably am. Dulcet, whatever. It was primarily highly eroticized cannibalistic art, which I found was quite appealing to me, and my fascination with it has grown over time. But it's a... So I guess I find it pretty interesting in that respect as well. One of the things I wanted to put out there is that if you're an artist and you want to create something that's interesting, then, you should try to create some cannibal-themed erotica, because there's not a huge demand for it, but there is, I think, a greater demand for it than there is a supply. So you would be the hero to this niche community of fucking freaks and weirdos if you were to do that. And send it to me first, because that would be pretty cool. Moving on to a question that is less inherently disturbing to the more prudish of my viewers. Well, actually, maybe not. This is Mr. Repsion, who is the sweet little Christian kid. I mean, he's not a kid, he's a technical adult, but I call him a kid because he has a very boyish appearance, and in my opinion, he has a sort of naivete that I think is interesting, and it creates a certain level of affection for me. For him, within me. For him, okay, I can't get through this fucking sentence worth of shit, but the point is, this is his question. Would you ever consider doing a threesome with me? Obviously not you and me having sex, but with another woman. Why is that? Why obviously? I don't... Okay, well, probably wouldn't do much for you, I guess. With another woman, sure. I mean, I'll have a threesome with anyone, with another... obviously if it's a woman that I want, We're going to be doing the whole spit roasting thing. Not obviously spit roasting in the cannibal sense, but just, me thrusting on one end and you thrusting on the other. I mean, that's... No, there's nothing wrong with that. That's, in fact, quite magical and charming. And I think that I think people like that. I think people want to see a big fat atheist and a scrawny little Christian kid pounding both ends of some fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your point of view, girl that happens to be in the middle. So yeah, that sounds like a pretty good deal. I think that would be a happy and momentous occasion that we could all, wave our little happiness flags over. How many bananas can you fit in your ass? This is a question asked by Fasty004, and it had 12 thumbs up. That last Repsion question had 18 thumbs up, by the way. I don't know. I've never gone beyond just the one. And I imagine that the answer is probably still just one, although that is something I seek to expand upon, if you get my drift. So yeah, I guess I really don't have much to say about that beyond, one, but hopefully more in the future. Although not specifically bananas, they're not the greatest thing to use for that particular purpose, seeing as they're so squishy, unless you get them very ripe, which the banana in the infamous banana video was not ripe, but very fresh and green, and that particular banana was very green and hard, although it looked fairly yellow in the actual footage that you saw. But trust me, it was green around the edges, if bananas have edges, which I don't think they technically do, but you know what I'm saying. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Do you still want to make a living off of YouTube, or is there something else you aspire to? That was asked by Dishonest Abe 0, and it had 21 thumbs up. I don't plan that far ahead for the simple reason that I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what associations are going to still exist, what associations are going to break down. I don't know how the dynamics of technology are going to change. I don't know how my life is going to change. I don't know if I'm going to be dead or paralyzed from the waist down, or if I'm going to be the first half human, half cyborg hybrid. I don't know if I'm going to lose all interest in communicating with the world. I don't know if I'm going to decide that YouTube is no longer for me and start a fucking rock band. I don't know if I'm going to decide that I'm no longer a vlogger but a poet and start doing slam poetry in front of predominantly African American audiences. I don't know. How can I know what the future holds for me? I try to be receptive to it, and obviously I do plan somewhat in advance, but not 10 years. I have things that I aspire to accomplish in, the next year, the next 2 years, but 10 years, I don't think that far ahead. I think it's a futile endeavor because I can't. There's too many variables. It's intellectually dishonest to have a plan that extends that far into the future, in my opinion. Although if you're someone who does that and it comforts you, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But for me, it doesn't work. What sort of grades did you get in school, and when did you stop giving a fuck about school, if you ever did? Oh, and when, if ever, did you feel intellectually above your peers? That was asked by Joe H. Bear, and it had 7 thumbs up. What sort of grades did I get in school? Very early on in my early scholastic academic career, they're called careers now, I think. A lot of kids talk about their kindergarten careers. Well, the parents do anyway. Early on, my grades were good, just as good as anyone else's, although I did get held back once because of my lagging social development, which I think lags to this day. I guess it was probably around 4th or 5th grade when I started getting very bad grades, not because I was doing poorly on the work I was given so much as I wasn't doing the work. And that trend persisted for a very long time until I was in 7th and 8th grade, because we moved to Washington State. It was a far more progressive approach to education, and my grades started to improve, and socially I began to improve, although I was still the weird fucking kid. However, we moved back to Louisiana when I was in 9th grade, and that all completely collapsed. I think I had zeros in many of my classes because I simply refused to do any work. I did not turn in any assignments. I had no interest in participating to even the slightest degree. I actually put tremendous effort into neglecting my studies and neglecting my school workload. And finally, that culminated in me quitting school and setting forth into the world, which was a decision that my mother didn't like at the time, although in her revisions of history she liked it. And it was a decision my father endorsed wholeheartedly because he believed that like I believe to this day, that public high school is basically just indoctrination. And I hold to that opinion to this day. The original plan was for me to go to junior college or to go directly into college based on the strength of my ACT scores, and I was going to take the SAT test, and every indicator was that I was going to have pretty good scores on the SAT as well as I had on the SAT, which were not tremendously high, but were well above average. But I never ended up taking the SAT, and I never ended up going to college, obviously. And, I just found my own path in life. And, sometimes I regret not having the higher education. Sometimes I regret not going to college just because I think it validates your intellect in some people's eyes. But I've never regretted dropping out of high school, not even for a second. I think that anyone who can drop out of high school should do so, and should pursue higher education opportunities if they seek to continue their education. Because spending, any time in high school that you don't absolutely have to by law is, in my opinion, a waste of time, unless you attend a very good school district, like the school district I attended in Washington State, which was actually quite good. As for feeling intellectually above my peers, I think that didn't start till slightly later on. I think it was in a science class in perhaps 6th grade, maybe 7th grade, 6th or 7th grade. We were doing a I don't know, it was an assignment wherein we as groups had to place organisms in order of their appearance on the planet Earth. And it was just fucking shameful. People were trying to put vertebrates, in front of invertebrates. People thought that jellyfish were more recent than mammals. It was just terribly preposterous, just silly people making very idiotic mistakes, and I was aghast at the whole spectacle, and that's about the time when I started to realize that I was surrounded by idiots. I'd suspected it before then, but that was when I was absolutely positively sure. And this is not me, by the way, this is not me as a child who has read a tremendous amount about evolution, or spent any amount of time dedicated to learning about this subject. This is just me aware to some extent of what's going on around me, although I can be quite oblivious to some things. But apparently I was far less oblivious than my peers when it came to just a very general, very simplistic layman's knowledge of evolutionary history. And that was very disconcerting. What made you shift away from libertarianism? This was asked by EC123456789able, and that had 25 thumbs up. Well, when it comes to social libertarianism, as you may have garnered from my answer to Blue Wolfie's question, I think I'm very much a libertarian to this day. If you watch some of the videos that I made during Hate Week on my far more popular YouTube channel, you'll see that I'm making some very libertarian arguments there as well. And, I don't feel like I've abandoned libertarianism, but the thing I guess that got me to abandon formal libertarianism is that I started to recognize that there are some things that just cannot function in a society without some measure of coercion. For instance, I became very concerned with the tendency of giant corporations to release dangerous products that, if they could get away with it, they'll release a dangerous product that, will kill people or hurt people, and they'll fail to do a recall if it's not cost effective, and they will pollute the environment. They will, just dump toxic shit and chemicals into the water supply. They'll pump smoke and smog and just this awful shit into the atmosphere. And they do it even with regulation, but prior to regulation, it was even worse. And I started to realize, these people are not going to regulate themselves if we don't force them to. And they will destroy us. They'll destroy this planet. They will have, a blithe disregard for all human life because they're giant corporations. Their loyalty is to their shareholders. And they're not going to comply with what we think of as common human decency, because that's not their prerogative. It's not their agenda. That doesn't make them money. It costs them money. And I think that you have to have a bully with a stick that's going to get them to mind their fucking manners. When it comes to individuals, however, you have... Let's say you have a society with a private fire department, and, every person has to pay for, fire insurance or something like that. And that's how it used to be, by the way. A lot of libertarians say, oh, that would be just fine, But, what if you don't pay your fire bill and your house burns down, and, the fire department just stands idly by with their arms crossed, Or, what if your burning apartment burns down the apartment next door? What if your burning house burns down the house next door? What if the fire spreads throughout the entire city, for that fucking matter? You have these libertarians also who are just terribly against universal health care and think it's the worst system ever. But, you have people like Steven Crowder who made this video about, the wait is so long in Canada, and he goes in with his superficial wrist injury and says, doctor, patch me up, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I waited 4 hours, then I left. And it is true that the wait times can be quite horrendous in Canada. Of course, people are prioritized even here based upon the severity of their injury. I'm sure that if Steven Crowder came in with a fucking, knife stuck in his back, it would have been a very different story. But, that you have, triage care where if someone comes in with a heart attack, they're going to get attention before someone who comes in because their leg fucking hurts. Now, there are some ridiculous wait times in Canada, but, at the end of the day, when the Canadian person, waits for 10 hours and then gets their thing looked at and then they go home, they're not, $10,000 in fucking debt. That's the difference. And I think it's unconscionable to expect people to pay for these tremendous medical costs when, we're all these shitty little biological organisms that are breaking down and degrading over time. We have cell degradation, and the longer we live, the more likely we are to contract either some horrible disease or cancer or, just have a horrific accident of some kind. And I don't think you can expect people to pay for that themselves. So you have to have some system in place that's going to take care of people. Because, ultimately, personal liberty doesn't mean shit if you're fucking dead or you're horribly, horribly ill. So I think that there has to be another consideration beyond just individual liberty, and that's the consideration I talked about a little bit earlier, wherein, you don't have the right to punch someone in the fucking face. And I also don't think that you have the right to create a system where people suffer and die for no reason when the solution is simple and it exists all around the world. There's plenty of companies that have health insurance mandated, like Japan and Germany and Sweden, and there's plenty of countries that just have government-run systems like the UK and Canada. And that works better. It has better results than our system does. There's better outcomes. And it costs less money because America spends more money on health care than any other country in the world, and we have worse outcomes. It would be less expensive for us to have some form of universal health care, whether that be the mandate of private insurance or that be a government-run system. And I actually favor the insurance mandate. But I think the Obamacare or the Affordable Health Care Act is not necessarily the best solution to that, but it is a step in the right direction. So I guess that my shift away from libertarianism is ultimately a shift away from the idea that, personal autonomy trumps the ability of people to, be healthy enough to use it. And I think that the fate of the planet trumps the rights of corporations to dump their fucking sewage into our drinking water and destroy our fucking biosphere. So I think that if you're someone who is even vaguely environmentally conscious, if you're someone who has even the slightest regard for your fellow man in terms of easing suffering, then you have to be someone who believes in a bully with a big stick to keep certain elements of our society in line. Thomas Hobbes called it the Leviathan. And I guess that's as good a name as any. And I believe that we need the Leviathan. I believe that if people aren't good, the dragon should come gobble them the fuck up. How do you... What do you think... I'm sorry, this is a little bit awkwardly worded. What do you think of how we deal with pedophiles? Do you think they can be helped? Well, in this society, that was asked by 20 killers and had 18 thumbs up, by the way. In this society, there is this witch hunt, paranoid fear of pedophilia. And pedophilia is somewhat falsely equated with child molestation, which is a very strange thing because there's it's very possible to fantasize about raping women without being a rapist. It's very possible to fantasize about cannibalism without being either cannibalized or a cannibal. It's very easy to fantasize about any number of things without actually engaging in, behaviors. And it's also very possible to be someone who is sexually attracted to children without actually going out and molesting them. So we have to, as a society, make that distinction, first of all. A pedophile is not necessarily someone who is trying to harm children. With that being said, if someone does harm a child, then obviously that can't be something that has no consequences. There has to be repercussions for that person, not just to deter other people from doing it, but also, just because that is something that our sense of social justice demands. I think that, however, when you create this atmosphere where the pedophile is the boogeyman, then you're not doing anyone any favors, including yourself. I think that we have to be a little bit more rational about this issue, and it seems to me like a lot of these pedophiles could use treatment, and if it's just determined that they can't be reintroduced in society, then maybe they should just be institutionalized for the remainder of their lives if they really just can't help but go out there and molest children or whatever else they're doing. In a lot of ways, legally, I think that our attitudes towards the problem are pretty sane and rational. There are a few exceptions, like here in my home state of Louisiana. I think there was a bill that was proposed where that would be child molestation would be an executable offense, which, is stupid. It's stupid and ridiculous and absurd, and, should not be on the table for a fucking second. But, mostly our attitudes towards it are rational. I think that there should be a little bit more treatment built into the system. But yes, they do need to be punished in some way, and I think maybe some preventative measures, like maybe publicly funded counseling for people who are at risk of offending and yet haven't offended yet, would also be a good thing to do. But mostly I think you need to change social attitudes towards it and get rid of this notion in a lot of people's heads that these are like these monsters lurking around every corner that have no humanity and are just basically raging beasts that are hunger for your children. We need to dispel that, and that I think would solve a lot of the other problems. How Did You Meet Howard Bloom? This is by Roll On Floor Laughing Harris 1706. It's ROFL. How Did You Meet Howard Bloom? That has 16 thumbs up. Well, it's not a very interesting story, but it did have a lot of thumbs up, so I guess I'll tell it. When I was about, I'll go back and give a little bit more background than is actually necessary. When I was about 16 years old, I took an older woman as my lover. She was about 30. she had a book called The Lucifer Principle by Howard Bloom, and I read it because she was reading it, and I actually she was reading it for quite a number of months, and I just picked it up and like read it in a couple nights, and much to her chagrin. And I found it very interesting. It really changed my perspective of the world in a lot of ways. Probably did a lot to shape me as a person. Perhaps I forget how much of an influence Howard Bloom was on me intellectually, simply because he's someone I actually know now. But that's how I was introduced to him as an author, and as a thinker, and as an academic, and as a scientist, and as a philosopher. And then later on, someone said to me that Howard Bloom is on Facebook, and I decided, well, if he's on Facebook, I'm definitely going to add him as a friend. Surprisingly, he accepted my friend request, and I, shortly thereafter, asked him if he'd like to do an interview with me, and much to my surprise, once again, he agreed. And then once he saw the size of the audience that I could get for him, we started doing regular discussions, and they've been a lot of fun. And I think we've talked about a lot of stuff, and I've seen the way he thinks, and I've seen how I've seen the similarities between us, and I've seen the differences, and I've seen how his mind works. And it's been an interesting experience because there were certain things in his books that I didn't really understand when I first read them, and then talking to him, I see the full context of what he was getting at, and it's kind of interesting to put a human face and a human personality behind words that formerly I knew a person wrote them, obviously, but they were cold and detached from any sort of personality or personal experience. Do you think public nudity should be legalized? The fear of nudity seems to be leading to quite a repressed society in certain ways. That's DGMC 13284. And that had 10 thumbs up. And of course, this is another consent issue. And there are arguments on both sides here. I think that on one hand, if your body is your property and you own it, then your nudity is you. And how can anyone say that your body is against the law to put on display? On the other hand, a great many people are very distressed at the sight of human nudity. They really, really, really don't want to see another person naked, and it just bothers them. My opinion is, fuck that latter group of people. Like I said, we cannot pass laws against hurting people's feelings. And if it hurts someone's feelings to see your no-no parts, then that's their fucking problem. I feel like public nudity should be illegal. And let's be honest here, most people are not going to go nude in public just because it's legal. Like, I'm not going to do that. My fat fucking ass is not going to walk around naked outside because I would get too many very reproachful stares from people who do not want to see me naked. Although, if the popularity of my banana video is an indication, then I suppose that there actually is quite a demand. But yeah. So, to recap, we have the person asking if I would deep throat the microphone, which I'm going to do in a second. Then we have the thing on cannibalism, which I believe consensual cannibalism is or should be permissible. And I also am personally interested in cannibalism from a fetishistic point of view, and have been since I was in my formative years. I would have a threesome with Mr. Repsion and a female or another male, but I know Mr. Repsion is not of that persuasion, so whatever. How many bananas can I fit in my ass? Just one for now, but I am working on building up to a larger capacity in that regard. Where do I see myself in 10 years? I don't think that far in advance. What grades did you get in school? Very poor ones. When did I feel intellectually superior to my peers? The very second that my peers showed their horrible, horrible, horrible ignorance of evolutionary history. What made you shift away from libertarianism? My compassion for other human beings and my concern for the welfare of the planet. What do you think of how we deal with pedophiles? Do you think they can be helped? I think that our approach is actually surprisingly rational, given the fact that there is a certain degree of horrible, horrible hysteria out there. And I actually didn't get a chance to touch upon the whole sex offender issue, which I think is a somewhat separate issue, but maybe I'll have a chance to do that in a future video on this channel. How did I meet Howard Bloom? Very boring. I just added him on Facebook when someone told me he was on there. Do I think public nudity should be legalized? Yes, I do. And now it's time to deep throat the microphone. Of course, I don't know if I can necessarily deep throat the microphone, but I'll do the best I can. And I gotta make sure I don't get any spit in these grooves here, so. Alright, that's the best I can do. Sorry if it was insufficient. I appreciate you guys watching this video. If you actually made it to this point by some miracle of your tolerance for really sedate bullshit coming out of the mouth of a fat fuck sitting on a chair in a house at midnight, then, you know, I don't even remember how that sentence began. I totally lost my way. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you liked it, you know, be sure to do all the things you do to videos you like thumbs up and all that bullshit. Let's be social media conscious here. Thanks for watching.